Hey there, this is Ray with Ray's Guide, and I'd like to talk about the best ships for doing crews in various sizes, and more important, what should be the best crew assignments of responsibilities in each of those ships. Because being crew isn't just about being inside the same hull, it's about knowing your role in the Seder Bowl team and knowing what to do in a situation. And that depends on the ship. And even ships that look a lot similar have different roles and styles. That's why I'm going to be talking about not just one single best ship anymore, and I'll be talking about one best set of tactics for Seder Bowl. It depends on the players in the arena, right? And anyhow, before I get too far on this, I haven't flown every ship and every crew combination. Just ain't enough hours of credits for that. So I'm presuming that these multi-crew ships are performing as advertised, and I trust that if they aren't, I'm going to get promptly informed of it in the comments, which is fine, since, after all, whatever is causing them to not behave as advertised will likely sometime get remedied. So to illustrate what I've been talking about, crew, let's talk about a couple ships that look quite similar, the Hurricane and the Gladiator. Now you may think big triangle ships, pilot in the front, turn behind, pretty much the same, right? But the difference is that the Hurricane puts most of its armaments in the turret. In terms of ancient aircraft, it might be like the Bolt and Paul Defiant, a craft with no pilot-controlled guns at all. Just that turret. Not quite a severe one-sided focus as the Hurricane, but it emphasizes that the pilot's number one job is to get the turret to have a clear field on the target more than getting one themselves. And another thing, clearly the Defiant and the Hurricane were vulnerable from below, so there is a need for the pilot and the turret gunner to coordinate when to do what I call roll targeting. In other words, the pilot has to manage the roll of the craft in order to get the turret visible to the threat trying to get at their underbelly. Now, the Gladiator, however, we have a ship more like the ancient SBD Dauntless, a scout bomber. Now, the difference, of course, is that the main event on the craft is the bombing ordnance, while the rear gunner is tasked with keeping away danger from the flanks and rear, those pesky zeros. In both, though, the need to coordinate roll maneuver in order to protect the underbelly is shared. I don't think that the Gladiator has been given quite as much praise as the Hurricane because pilots seem to focus more on guns than missiles. Pretty much in the same category, a forward-facing armament ship with a secondary gunner to cover the flanks and rear is the Vanguard series, which I like to compare to the ancient Messerschmitt 110's destroyer. Otherwise, like the Gladiator, I don't think the Vanguard is being regarded as much as a multi-crew ship as it should because people are seeing the turret as not adding much to what is already a formidable forward-facing strength on the Vanguard. But that isn't the point, of course. The point is to cover the flanks. Speaking of another craft that hasn't gotten the attention that I think it warrants is the Reliant Tanner, a ship I liken to the A6 Intruder of the Vietnam era, right down to the side-by-side seating. The reason for the lack of attention is that I think that folks imagine the second seat controlling the gimbal turrets at the ends of the wings, when in reality, just like the Intruder, the role of the second seat is to aim and fire the missiles, which the Tanner has 20 size 2s. Now, the thought of a ship with the maneuverability of a light fighter class being able to simultaneously assault with guns and that many missiles, interesting. In addition to the missiles, the second seat can manage the power distribution and improve the performance in a way that the single-seat pilot just hasn't enough hands to pull off that well, which will also bring up the role of second seat in the Banu Defender. The Defender has only 4 size 2 missiles, so the primary role of the second seat on the Defender is going to be power management. Now let's take a look at a couple even larger ships for a crew or two, and the first is a Cutlass Black. Tactically, it resembles the Vanguard, significant forward-facing firepower for the pilot, turret to cover the flanks and tail, and a significant need to do roll targeting to keep the underside from being vulnerable. But the real story on the Cutlass over the Vanguard is mission variety. Want to pick up a gem mining buggy in the rear? Sure. Pick a couple of bikers? Check on that. Do some various missions? Go ahead. A couple of the missions that might readily benefit from having a friend along is the Search the Shipwreck for Missing Persons mission, and particularly the Time Salvage mission. The real key to success in that mission is how fast you find, load, unload, and deposit those green boxes. And having a second set of hands, not to mention a second tractor beam, can make a success a whole lot easier. And my final ship at the potentially great but overlooked ones for a crew or two is the Freelancer Miss. And that is likely because, despite all the same mission variety of the Cutlass, the Freelancer's tail turret, as compared to the Cutlass's, has a justifiably bad reputation for having a horrible range of vision. But I'm not talking about that second crew member being in the turret. I'm talking about them playing Missile Commander at 21 size 3 missiles, plus, of course, power management. The downside, of course, is the lack of maneuverability, which is why the miss is most likely going to be focused on ships even more sluggish than itself, softening them up with all those missiles from out of gun range, and then finishing them off with the 4 size 3 guns from the pilot. Like the Cutlass, the Freelancer miss offers considerable mission variety. So that takes us from Crew 2 to Crew 3. And the first thing you can consider here is filling the empty seats on those last 2 craft I was talking about. Adding a missile and power operator to the Cutlass is a good move. The Cutlass Black comes with standard with a mixture of size 2 and size 3 missiles, but for simplicity, I usually change the loadout so that they're either entirely size 2, which means 20 of them, or entirely size 3s, which would mean 10 of them. Not inconsequential, but nothing like the loadout on the miss. Putting somebody in the rear tour of the Freelancer will help cover your tail, but expect that they'll still need to be doing a lot of roll aiming to cover the underside. But more interesting are the ships that can put top and bottom coverage and not have to worry about roll targeting and all. And the first up on that list is the Mercury Star Runner, a popular ship for all sorts of reasons, but with both the top and bottom turrets, man, you have no blind spots, although maneuvering the craft so that both turrets and the pilot can get nose guns on the target will likely be needed to take down a larger target. Since the Star Runner only has 4 size 3 or 8 size 2 missiles, having a missile commander is a low priority. Next up is the constellation Andromeda, which is a tough choice since there are several options about how to distribute the Crew of 3. But I decided the priority one has to be to get those blind spots covered on a ship this large and slow, but bear in mind that the main show on the counter is the forward-facing armament, particularly the quad-gimbaled size 4 guns in front. So you got to keep the other angles covered while you get that nose on target. And of course, this would go for the other constellation models with 2 weapon turrets as well. Then there's the Retaliator. Now, I know some folks try to do this ship solo in a stealthy way. It's kind of a double-size Eclipse. But this video is about multi-crew. My suggestion is that the minimum multi-crew for staff with a Retaliator is 3. Pilot, chin turret, top turret, which is accessible from the upper deck up that ladder behind the pilot, which gets you to full coverage, but still a little weak from the rear. But hang on, and I'll cover how to increase this as your crew grows. Now the luxury yacht of the 3 cruise ships, the 600i. In the 600i, if you can get them away from the line, has 2 remote turrets to be operated to give you coverage. But like the Connie, the big event on the 600i is the pilot-controlled size 5 main guns, which at least my preference would be make them size 4 gimbaled, since the 600i is not easy to get straight on target. Still, with just a crew of 3, I'd keep my hindquarters covered rather than have a dedicated person for the 16 size 3 missiles. And to wrap up the crew of 3 discussion, I would regard the minimum crew for that for a crewed carry. But which of the 2 sets of turrets do you staff? The outboard ones or the top and belly turrets? My call is the 2 outboard turrets, since when occupied they extend outward like the hammerheads and they have a great field of vision. So now on to the crew of 4, which is exactly like the list of ships of 3, but making choices about which is the next crew role to fill. Now, first, the constellation Andromeda, which is my choice for a 4th crew member, is to play missile commander. The pilot has 4 size 4 gimbaled weapons to take care of, so having extra help with the 52 size 1 and 2 missiles is an obvious next choice of what to do next. Now, I'm thinking some of you are thinking, why not put the 4th crew member in the Merlin? And the answer is that if your choice to have a 4th crew member is have an escort craft, well, why not put him in a Gladius, or Era, or Talon, or you get the idea. But having the ability to have both the 4 size 4 guns and the 52 missiles simultaneously managed on a target brings much more to the table in my view. For the Mercury Star Runner, the 4th crew seat goes to the co-pilot seat for power management and missiles. The Star Runner has just 5 missiles. In fact, among the currently flyable ships, the Star Runner is the only Crusader ship with any missiles at all. Crusader just doesn't seem to like the things much. Even the big gun areas will just be a big gun with only 4 size 3s. And then you get the same thing goes for the 600i, although I might be tempted to change the 16 size 3 missiles to 8 size 4, or go really heavy hitting and get 4 size 5s and reserve them for just the really tough nuts. For the Retaliator, I would put the 4th crew member in the tail gunner seat. Always good to cover your behind. And in the Carrack, I would put the extra crew member in the remote top turret. Now we get up to the crew of 5, which I regard as the minimum crew for a hammerhead. So you can have each of the 4 corners covered in addition to the pilot. And for the constellation, you might as well use them to fire out the Merlin, since there's very little else for a 5th person to do. And then for the Retaliator, I would move the 4th crew member to one of the side turrets and have the 5th crew member get to the other side. With 6 crew members, the Retaliator has now fully realized its potential for being the new incarnation of the B-17 Fighting Fortress. The Hammerhead can go beyond just covering the corners, and I would put the 6th crew member in the top turret. As for the rest, we're pretty much just talking about having reserve crew members at this point until additional roles become available in the near future. And finally, the crew of 7, the fully occupied Hammerhead, filling out the tail gunner last. Is it worth it on a Hammerhead to have an 8th person to occupy the co-pilot seat? Well, the Hammerhead has an impressive set of missiles, 32 size 3 stock, but it has no pilot-controlled guns, so it isn't as though the pilot has to divide his attention. So not really all that worthwhile for an 8th person, particularly since each of the gunners has their own capacitors for the power management. Now, there are a number of ships I haven't talked about because they are specialist ships, because the first priority when they call them out of the hangar is whether you're doing that specialized kind of activity, not the multi-crew possibilities. The 890 is a party ship, the Valkyrie is a large drop ship, the Prowler is a small drop ship, and the Caterpillar and Hercules are haulers. Can you use an extra crew member for keeping them running at their best and safest? Yeah, sure, but the first question with all of them is, what are you doing today? Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Ray with Ray's Guide.
Contact. They're pulling back. We've got them on the run.